jump into the chat. This is going to be fun. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too.
All right. Yes, got it. It says we're being live on YouTube. Let me just go click on it. There we go. Where is the chat? If you're just joining, welcome. If you can give me the heads up that you're able to hear, that would be fantastic. I'm going to type in the chat now as well. Hello, everyone. Great to have you here. Awesome. I mean, I know it's Monday, so some people are probably Monday morning working, but there are those who I'm sure will be able to join. I definitely put out a little thing that said hello to everyone and that we're going to do this. Peter, are you able to say something?
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me? All right.
Amazing. Thank you, Miriam, for letting me know. Great to have you here, Miriam. Awesome. I am super excited about this conversation. It is one of the conversations that I knew just we needed to have if we're going to talk about manifestation. Specifically because, hey, Lily, welcome. Anytime we're trying to make any kind of change, inevitably the human being's mind is hardwired for the projection of either routines or patterns or ritual or a comfort zone, which Peter's going to get more into here in a moment. And in the creation of trying to do something new, inevitably we get to a place where we do have to deal with, why do I keep repeating the same things? I know I want to go left. Why do I keep going right? And hypnosis is one of the many tools that we can access to facilitate the creation of a new world and new choices. Peter was trained in 2006 at the American Academy of Hypnotherapy in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he has training in neurolinguistic programming from the NLP Center in New York City. He is a certified hypnotherapist and life coach, and the author of 2 books, Becoming the Customer and Healing the Wounds of Time. In Peter's work, if you've ever had a look at his website, I'll be linking it here in the chat for you guys so that you can find him and work with him. In Peter's work, he has done many things to assist people, including helping to eliminate things like IBS and gastrointestinal issues for folks, but not just that. People who have been stuck in relationships or bad negative relationship patterns that they'd like to overcome, or money patterns and blocks that they'd like to overcome. He's been able to help them break through and get to the other side, whether it's been years or decades of struggle. Peter, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here today.
It's wonderful to be here, Kay. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So there is his website. I'm going to link his YouTube here in a moment. We're going to do some listener Q&A. So if you've got questions for Peter, please drop them in the chat. But I'm really grateful that you decided to be a part of Creator Conference. Now, we've all heard of hypnosis at this point. Most people have. And that it can be really helpful for things like quitting smoking, losing weight, trauma, healing issues with trauma. But how does hypnosis work to help with things like manifesting a job or money or starting a business or even love and relationships?
So the way that I go about helping people get to their goals, releasing the things that they don't want anymore and getting to the place that they do want to, is by constantly simplifying the process in my own mind. So where I've gotten to over the past 17 years, where I am right now, is I think of sort of the 2 sides of the same coin. One side would be something that we would refer to as a block. What's pulling you back in the direction that you don't want to go? What keeps the relationships from either not occurring in the first place, for example, or from breaking up? And then on the other side of the same coin, what would you need to do on the positive end to get to where you wanted to go? So another simple way of describing this is if you had a blackboard in front of you and you had the word, I don't know, lonely written on there or abandonment written on there, and you took an eraser and you erased that word. Now you have a blank slate. What's the new word that you want there? So I'm always thinking on these two sides of the same coin. What are the blocks that person is experiencing? What's preventing them from getting to where they want to go? And then what kind of accelerant do we need to add to the other side to help them get there?
I love it. It's almost like, okay, where do they have the foot on the gas and the foot on the brake that they're
Perfect.
getting
Yep.
that has the car stuck?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. These pictures occur in my mind sometimes when I'm talking about these things or working with somebody. And I'm imagining somebody, driving along a mountain pass and they're trying to get to the summit of the mountain. And there's a huge boulder blocking their way. Okay, they can't go right because that's going to take them off, the side of the cliff. I suppose they could back down, but then they wouldn't reach their goal. What would we need to do to get that boulder out of the way? And what is that boulder? Well, the answer is usually that boulder is a trauma from their past. And in the way I work, that past is either something earlier in this lifetime, something that happened earlier in this lifetime that set up this dynamic, or it's something that occurred in a past lifetime. Wherever it happened, it's that earlier event that is living in the now of their subconscious mind, preventing them from getting to where they want to go.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So there can be a thing that happened in the past that can prevent me in the now, and I could potentially be completely unaware of it.
100%.
Interesting.
So if you realize that one of the laws of the subconscious mind is that it's designed to protect you, that's one really important law to keep in mind. The second one is that it has no concept of time. If you put those two things together, in my view, it perfectly describes PTSD. So, a soldier can be in a war 15 years ago on the other side of the world, say from the United States. And yet 15 years later, they're not in the war anymore. They're not in military uniform. And yet they can experience triggers that cause them to have an anxiety attack, that cause them to flip out in public or with their family. Why? Because the subconscious, when it gets triggered, is believing that their life is in danger. And so the body reacts as if they're in combat still, even though they're not, because the subconscious mind has no concept of time, and its job is to protect that person. So the only way, again, in my opinion, that you can solve this is to go into the subconscious and help the subconscious understand that the war is over. There's no longer any danger. And the way we would know if we solve this is that when the trigger occurs, the person doesn't have the physiological response, whether that's the elevated heart rate and the rapid breathing and the jaw clenching and the actions that they take that let us know that their subconscious believes they're in danger. When the trigger is pulled and that doesn't happen, we know that we have solved the problem.
Amazing. I really love that. All right, Peter, I have a question for you
Sure.
because I've seen on your channel that you've got hypnosis tracks that help people reprogram the subconscious mind. And I've also seen on your channel that you've got subliminal tracks for sleep, one in particular for creating a healthy, harmonious relationship for people who have relationship challenges. Now, Peter, this is some craziness. I listened to that one for multiple nights in a row. And it's a rain track, so all you really hear is rain.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to explain to me how this works. So I'm listening to the track. My person, not in the bedroom with me, but I'm listening to it night after night after night. Then things in the relationship and not just that relationship, but several others start to somehow magically get better
Hmm.
when they're not listening to the track.
Hmm.
How on earth are you doing this magic that you do?
Okay. I like the way you set that up. If your computer were behaving in a way that you weren't happy with, and I were a computer programmer, and you called me up and you said, "Hey, you need to fix this," and I come over to your house, or I remotely connect to your computer and I change the programming. In other words, the software, the part of the computer that you don't interact with. You interact with the hardware part of the computer, but the software is what controls it. And we made some changes to key lines of code in that computer. No one would be astonished to find out that the computer now behaves differently. It's the same thing with us. Our body is the hardware. Our mind is the software. But it's not just the part of your mind that you are aware of, your conscious mind. It's primarily the subconscious mind that is the operating system, that is the software that is running your whole life. And relationships in particular conform to the laws of physics. In other words, every action causes an equal and opposite reaction. You can't partner dance with 5 different people in the exact same way, because each person is bringing something different to the party. If you change something unexpectedly, the other person has to respond and react to that change. So as you change the software in your essence, in your being, it means that unconsciously, which is how most of our actions occur, is going to begin to change in those relationships. And like a partner dancing, as you change something, they have to change something in response. Does that make sense?
Yes, especially when we consider that all of this is just energy and all the energy is all connected. Sure.
Correct. And most human communication is clearly nonverbal. One of the things that I did, I've been doing this work for 17 years, but one of the things that I did in my past was I was a professional actor in New York City. And the art of the actor is nonverbal. It's their communication through their body language, and then things like vocal tone, cadence, pitch, volume, silence, timbre, and so on. If this weren't true, as a thought experiment, then you could have a packed Broadway theater and you could have anyone from the audience who knew how to read come up on stage and read the play of Hamlet, and everybody would be, "Oh, this is the best thing I've ever witnessed in my life." That's not why we hire actors. We hire actors to interpret the words through their voice and through their body. So in a relationship, you are constantly, or just in general, you're constantly broadcasting to the world through your body, through your voice, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about the situation, and how you feel about the other person. Now, let's go back to the subliminal track that you were listening to at night that is helping to program your deeper subconscious mind in how you feel about yourself, in how you feel about your partner. Doesn't it make sense that if you listen to it enough, and you did, that would begin to affect your unconscious communication? And as your unconscious communication changed, let's say to more positive feelings about yourself, more positive feelings about your partner, that relationship would begin to transform.
I mean, you make it sound like such simple A plus B equals C, but wow, does it feel like woo woo?
And that's what I was saying before, that I've been trying to do over the last 17 years for myself to help people. I have to simplify it. I have to boil it down to its essence. And once I do that, it's a much clearer path in my mind of what we need to do to help any given client get from A to B.
I love that. I mean, it definitely felt like, wait, what is happening? Like, I'm the only one listening to this,
Right.
but the relationships are all changing. How?
Yes. The other thing I will say to add to this, because to key in on what you said about I'm the only one listening to this. is that when you are in a meditative state, I think when you're in a dream state, when you're in a hypnotic state, and you encounter another person in your consciousness, that what's really happening is that your soul or your spirit, whatever you want to call that eternal essence of who you really are, is meeting with the essence, the soul or the spirit of this other person in the quantum field. That we have to get past this idea that your body is all, that we live in a materialistic universe. We know that that's not true. And that when your essence, when your consciousness meets with the consciousness of another person in the quantum field, it's like you and I talking right now using our voices, or you and I meeting at a coffee shop and our bodies are in proximity to each other. I don't think there's any difference. And when this happens and you affect some kind of change in that relationship, something in the dynamics, which is generally going to come down to forgiveness, that it then affects its component on the physical plane. As if, part of us is always existing in the quantum field. And there's silver threads connecting back to us here on the physical plane. And so we change something in the quantum field, of course it's going to change on the physical plane.
Extraordinary. I love that you brought that into the conversation.
Well, you helped me
'Cause
by what you talked about.
well, everything is mind before it is matter.
Correct.
Yeah, we know this from, the
Ancients.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. So
There's a book that I'm sure it sounds like you're familiar with it. It's called The Kabbalion.
yes.
It's not the Kabbalah. I don't know anything about that. That may say something similar, but it's called the Kabbalion, which is Kybalion, and it describes the 7 hermetic laws. Hermetic meaning sealed or hidden, the laws that govern the behavior of the universe. And in the beginning of this book, it says all is mind, which I totally believe, and that's what you just said.
Yes. Yes, I am familiar with the Kabbalion. I'll be linking that for you guys in the description box below. If you're curious about that, you can check it out in addition to Peter's work. Those will all be linked. So because all is mind, and you specifically go in as almost like a mind mechanic here.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect way of describing it.
Or like a mind engineer, you can help us like swap the parts, move them in different places. Can you talk to us about some of the breakthroughs that your clients have had with hypnosis that might help our listeners understand what's possible? We've all
Yes.
heard of like quit smoking and this and that, but anything beyond that that you think might be interesting for folks?
Well, yes. And the first thing I would say is that whatever it is that you are unhappy with, and being overweight is a very, very common issue for people these days. I think it's, what is it, 2/3 of people in the United States are overweight, and I think 40% of those people are obese. It's becoming a larger and larger problem. When I was a kid, and this will help reveal my age, growing up in the 70s, one kid generally in a class of 25 would be overweight, and it's just accelerated and accelerated. Well, anything that is a quote unquote a problem or a challenge, whatever you want to call it, is really a symptom. That's how I view it. So back to that idea of a mind mechanic, I talk about auto mechanics, that if smoke's coming out of the engine of your car, or it's making weird noises, or it's pulling to the left, all of those things are symptoms of a deeper problem. It's not actually the problem if you think about it. It's a symptom. So whatever you're dealing with, this is another kind of law that I operate under. Whatever your issues are, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I have so many issues." Well, it's all traceable back down to something much deeper, something under the hood, buried in the bowels of the engine, that when you make that change at that deep level, of course the symptoms go away. So you asked about, remarkable changes, and there have been so many, but some examples would be this is somebody I worked with not long ago. This young guy, um, 19, 20 years old, very smart, and a football player. And one of his symptoms was significant pain in his spine. So much so that, he was an avid, gym rat, and he built really, really well, but he was under tremendous pain, and it meant that he couldn't play football anymore, and he was having a really hard time going to the gym. Plus, he was having significant anxiety or panic attacks, and he felt like he was sort of trapped, that he couldn't move forward. And after working with him, and in his case, it was very rapid. Within 2 sessions, the pain was gone, completely and utterly gone. And within 3 sessions, the panic attacks and anxiety attacks were completely gone. And so very quickly, he was able to move out of this place of feeling trapped and feel like his life was open for him again. Another woman that I had worked with, who hadn't dated in 7 years, and was stuck in that, and wanted nothing more than to be married and to have a family, and was, getting older, moving into her late 30s, and feeling like, is this ever going to happen for me? And in her past, she had a string of very unhappy relationships with men where they always left her. And we did probably, I don't know, 6, 8 sessions perhaps. And the last time I heard from her, she sent me a picture of her with her fiance, with the ring, and felt like she had moved through something, that she was with somebody that was completely different from the types of people the types of men she was with in the past. I have people that report this to me all the time, and I'm not allowed to do this. So I'm just telling you what they told me about how after we worked together, they no longer were depressed. Like that young man that I told you about, that they no longer had panic attacks, that they no longer had migraine headaches, that as I mentioned with the woman, that their relationship life had changed, and not just with romantic partners, but also in certain cases with their children or with their parents. Our mind, if the Kabbalion is correct, and mind is all is mind, then what could you not affect by helping people to change those 2 aspects I described before? What's blocking them from going where they want to go, and what do they need to do to accelerate that? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Of course, it's powerful. I love that, because now we're really talking about our capacity to shift what we either think are lifelong patterns, things we either just have to put up with, or we're stuck, or maybe it's genetic, and situations that we feel like, well, I guess this is just who it is, how I am, just how it is, just what I have to live with. It's interesting how complacent we can get when we feel like we've tried, quote unquote, everything.
That's exactly right. And it also, when you say it that way, it makes me realize, and I've said this for years, that often when I see people, they say to me, I've tried everything, and that's the only reason I'm calling you. I mean, when people have problems, the first avenue of approach is usually not hypnotist. It's usually not things like past life regression, or a meeting with a spirit guide, or solving something at the deepest levels of their mind. They're usually thinking about, the more conventional approaches. So I actually relish when people come to me and they say, I've tried everything, because I feel like when they believe they've tried everything, they're going to be open to things that perhaps they wouldn't have been open to had they started this at the front end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And when
Now,
someone's open, when they're open and they're motivated and they have courage, I know I'm working with somebody that's going to reach their goals.
I absolutely love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. So, oh, shoot, I was going to ask a quick follow up. about that because there was something you had said in there. Let me see, thought come back to me. But I think one of the things that intrigues people, oh, yes, you had mentioned meeting a spirit guide and past life regression. Not everyone who's a hypnotherapist will go there. You go there, Peter?
I go, yeah. I mean, that's what my practice is built around the proposition that all of us, every last one of us, has an inner magnificence, has this brilliant inner light, and that it can get covered up by trauma, and that we are eternal beings, that we didn't just zip into creation when the sperm and the egg came together with our parents, that we have always existed, that we will always exist, that we are spiritual creatures. And so I don't allow the tiny little box that our society tells us is the sum total of our existence to limit the ability when working with clients to get to the real root of the problem. Because if you can't get to the root of the problem and resolve it, how are you going to fix it? Then you are just going to be managing it forever. That's so yes, that's in a nutshell. Yeah, my my universe is a universe. It's not a world. It's not a planet. It's a universe, because that is what I'm sure of who you really are, who I really am. And Einstein said, if you want to solve a problem, you cannot solve it at the level at which it was created. You have to go up a level. War never solves war any more than trash and filth and pollution solves trash and filth and pollution. You have to change. You have to go up a level. And I conceive of this as a spiritual leap or advancement forward. That the problems exist in a way to help us grow.
I love it. That is very powerful. And, you know, oh, it's okay. We have a couple of audience questions. RS says, I gotta see this man, but I'm in Colorado. You work virtually?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Starting in 2020,
Yeah.
in 2020, at that point, I was seeing probably 85% of my clients in person, had an office and the whole nine yards. And after sitting in my office for a year by myself, I thought, wait a second, I'm doing 100% of my stuff on Zoom right now. And some people like to just do phone. So I now can live anywhere. So at that point, I closed up my office, ultimately sold my house and moved. And now I see people not just from all over the US, but literally from all over the world. I've even had people who wanted to work in person come here from other countries and from other parts of our country. So I feel like we've entered a whole new dynamic place where we don't have to be physically proximate. We can, but we don't have to be. And I have found that it works very, very well. That very quickly, within 5 minutes, you don't even realize you're online. It's kind of like being in the room together.
Powerful. I love that. All right. Are results with hypnosis lasting? Like, what's the number one thing people might need to do to make sure that their results are long lasting?
Great question. And I'm gonna give you my simplified answer, my analogy. If you and I wanted to create a garden and we were trying to do it, the only place you really had was an area of your property that was paved. It used to be a driveway, it used to be a garage there or something. We could throw the seeds down on top of that pavement, but I don't think we'd expect a lot of success because there's a block in the way called the asphalt. The first thing that we'd have to do is we'd have to get that block out of the way. We'd have to break up that asphalt. So, the traumas that you've had earlier in your lifetime, I'm saying represents the block. That's what's pulling you backwards, pulling you in the opposite direction from where you want to go. Once we did that, if we then sort of tilled the soil, broke the soil up, then we put the seeds down. In this analogy, the seeds are hypnotic suggestions. It's the programming, the positive programming that goes into the mind. And like a garden, we wouldn't expect that we could just walk away from it at that point. We'd still need to water it, And if we really wanted it to be successful, when the weeds started to grow up, we'd spend a little bit of time every week just pulling those weeds out, and we'd have a very healthy garden. It's kind of the same with the garden of your mind. Remove the blockage, or the blockages, plural, plant the seeds, and then tend to the garden, maintain the garden. And how that would translate is that you and I work together. We go through the heavy lifting of breaking up that asphalt, of resolving these traumas and this pain of your past that's been pulling you in the opposite direction. That's the biggest lift that you're going to feel. You're going to notice this because when the old triggers get pulled, you don't have a physiological response to it. Your body doesn't move into fight or flight mode. And because of that, everything begins to change that's connected to that old pattern. Secondly, long after you've worked with me, I would suggest that you tend to your garden. And that would be listening to some of these audio tracks. Maybe you do it just once or twice a week. Maybe you establish some kind of a practice, like a meditative practice, a self-hypnosis practice, something that might be considered qigong or yoga or tai chi, something that equates to tending to your garden to just remove those weeds when they start coming up. If you do these things, the results, of course, would be long lasting. You know, kind of like that example that I gave before about a computer programmer and changing lines of code. You know, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's pretty close. Does that answer your question?
100%. I love that. Because I was going to say, like, do I just do hypnosis once and I'm locked in, good to go? But I love how you talked about it as a garden.
Right. And the hardest part, the most strenuous part, is just like breaking up that asphalt.
Mm.
You know, when you bring people in their consciousness to the root cause of a problem that is very important to them, you know, like say a person feels like they keep getting abandoned. Well, that is enormously emotionally charged. And what if this is not the first lifetime they've been struggling with that? What if they've been struggling with that for 3 lifetimes? And let's say that the root cause is 3 lifetimes ago when something really painful happened. Well, when you take them back to that painful experience in their consciousness, there's a lot of emotion. There's grief, there's sadness, there's anguish. Tears stream down their faces. That's not simple. That's not falling off a log. You know, like if someone had an arrow or something embedded in them and you help pull it out, it would hurt. But once it's out, the relief that they feel is enormous. And when you clean all of that up, you really are helping to free people from a kind of bondage. And the example that I gave of abandonment, the only way that someone can be abandoned over and over again is, in essence, and this is also ancient wisdom, for them to believe, not true, but for them to believe the illusion that they are not worthy of someone staying. That on some level, this means that they've abandoned themselves through this belief in an illusion that was created by the original trauma. And so that generally is not one session. That's generally several sessions. You know, sometimes it can be more than that. It depends on what they're dealing with and how resistant to change they are. But when all of that is finally cleaned up, that is lasting, unless they suffer some other trauma. That's lasting. And the main positive benefit of this is that they switch that old belief that they are somehow not worthy of what they want to they are worthy. They're no longer abandoning themselves. They have now gone from, for example, low self-esteem, low self-love, low self-worth to its opposite, to being able to love themselves and to receive the love of others.
Love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's helpful, especially with this follow-up question that we have from somebody different. Adventurous asks, well, do you have to repeatedly work on a subconscious belief until the old belief doesn't trigger you anymore?
My answer to that is yes. Yeah, absolutely. If we go back to car mechanics, and you have your car's making some weird noise, you would expect the mechanic to trace back to the origin of what's creating that noise, because the noise is just a symptom, and to affect the change, to replace the part that has gone bad or the parts plural until that noise goes away, so that you can drive down the road and you don't have to turn up the radio so you don't hear the noise anymore. I think it's the same with us. I also think that we all have a kind of primary and primal original wound that I believe is described in the legend of Achilles, the myth of Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior that ever existed. But he had this weakness because his mother held him by his Achilles heel into the river Styx, which protected the rest of him. He still had this one part of him that was vulnerable. And he had to take care to make sure that that part of him was protected. So what do I mean by this in terms of the rest of us? That if the wound, and we'll use abandonment again, if that's the primal and primary wound, that we can heal the origin of that. But I believe that there will always be a kind of echo, a kind of Achilles vulnerability in that area. And that it's our duty to, tending your garden, to reinforce that, so that the wound, once it's healed, will never be what it originally was. It will never hold you back because it doesn't have the same power over you. But it will always be important for you to reinforce its opposite. So what's the opposite of abandonment? It has to be something like self-love, self-worth, self-esteem. And what I would recommend is that in your 10 minutes a day of meditational practice, however that unfolds for you, whether it's prayer or meditation or self-hypnosis or Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga or something, or walking through the woods, that you reinforce in your mind in this practice, I am worthy of love. I love myself. And because I'm worthy of love and because I love myself, other people love me. Hopefully that makes sense.
100%. I love that. Thank you. That was a great answer. Provided a lot of clarity. Flower in our chat asks a more specific question about emotional eating. How can she physically keep herself from doing that? And have you worked with people who have that?
That's so the two categories I would say that represents the bulk of my clients, certainly not all of them, would be things related to being overweight. And then the other one, which often goes hand in hand, is anxiety and all of its manifestations. So anxiety, stress. I even think that held long enough that turns into depression. With respect to emotional eating, my belief is that a person engages in emotional eating. And by the way, I think we all have done this at some point because we need food to stay alive, but we can also use food as a drug. And the way I think human beings utilize drugs and other kinds of addictive behavior is to give themselves a period of relief. So if you're in a state of some kind of distress, of anxiety, of panic, even boredom is a form of distress. Nobody wants to be in that state. That the eating temporarily takes you out of that state. So if we go back to the concept that the thing that you don't want is a symptom, it's being driven by something deeper, then we would have to ask the question, what is driving the stress, the distress, or the anxiety that you're attempting to remove yourself from temporarily by eating a whole bag of smart food, by eating, a bunch of cookies or ice cream or chips or whatever it is, whatever your food drug of choice is. And once we relieve that deeper source of the anxiety and the stress, and we gave you another mechanism for entering the opposite state, the state of bliss. And in terms of the autonomic nervous system, you're either fight or flight, or you rest and digest. And I guarantee you that when you're emotionally eating, you have moved into fight or flight. And your subconscious, which is really brilliant, is giving you a little way out of it by causing this compulsion to put something in your mouth, to taste the sugar, to taste the salt, to taste the fat, whatever it is. That when we move you into that rest and digest thing, there's no need for this. So it's resolving the deeper sources, because this could go back to earlier in your present life, could go into a past lifetime, that resolving those deeper sources of stress and anxiety, panic, whatever's causing that, and then giving you another way out so that every day you can move yourself into this other state. That is the sort of macro approach to this, if that makes sense. And I'm sure that there's some follow-up questions here, because it's a great question and it affects a lot of people, but I don't want to keep droning.
Well, that was a wonderful explanation. And it even brought some awareness. Flower shares in the chat that she stopped smoking marijuana and drinking, and food had then become her drug of choice.
Okay.
And there was an aha about that.
Exactly. Because what that means is that she shifted the drug that she was using to relieve the anxiety. She just shifted it from one drug to another drug without solving the deeper problem, which is super common. So ultimately, what we would want to do is identify and then solve the deeper problem. If you were walking around in physical pain and drinking whiskey took you out of that pain, who are we to say that that's a bad idea? Or if overeating or eating crappy food took you out of that pain, who are we to say that that's a bad idea? Does it have negative side effects? Absolutely. But we would all understand that what we really need to do is we need to get that arrow that's sticking out of her calf. We need to get that out of her calf so she's not in pain anymore. Because when she's not in pain, she's not going to need that drug anymore as a crutch, or the other drug, or the other behavior. But I just don't think we make that connection in our society. I think we see it as some kind of a moral failing, rather than as the response to some kind of deeper pain. And I would take you and your listeners back to that statement that I made about the subconscious early in this conversation, that its job is to protect you, that it has no concept of time. It doesn't want you to be in pain. It also doesn't want you to be in danger. And human beings are herd animals. We're more like dogs than we are like cats. We feel safer when we are around other people. And the subconscious can say, everyone else is heavy, everyone else is overweight. If you're not, you're going to be the outlier. That's not a safe place to be. You need to put on some weight so you can fit in with the herd. You can fit in with the tribe. I'm not saying that's what's going on for your listener who's talking about emotional eating, but it's one of the examples. But the bottom line is that it is traceable back to a specific reason or reasons. And those reasons are going to be something that has to do with protection, that often has to do with trauma. And we can resolve those in the deeper mind. And when we do, the compulsion goes way down.
Very helpful. Thank you. Love the answer to the questions you're providing.
I'm glad.
It illuminates a lot. Now, it's interesting because a couple of people have started to talk about boredom here in the chat, because you had mentioned that could be a root cause here. How on earth do you help people with boredom through hypnosis?
Well, I call myself a hypnotist and a life coach because I think ultimately a person doesn't care how the deck on their house is built. What tools the carpenter uses to build the deck. They don't care about that. They just want the deck. And more importantly, they want to be able to they want to have the experiences of having a deck on the back of their house. So with respect to boredom, What I would say is it means that that person is not aligned with their deeper passions. It means they're not aligned with their deeper purposes. Now, why would that be? Well, generally speaking, it has to do with fear. They fear that, I'll give you an example that's come up recently with a couple of clients, that their deepest desire was to be a singer, but they had tremendous fears due to old traumas about stepping into doing that kind of work, pursuing that kind of life. And so if a person doesn't pursue what their heart tells them to do, and they go and do something that they perceive as totally safe, it makes sense to me that, because I've been there, that they would feel bored, right? They're not challenging themselves. So part of it is helping people to understand that concept. Because when you understand it, there's going to be a little bit less resistance and there's going to be a little bit more willingness. Secondly, if there's this trauma in the past or in a past lifetime that is the reason, the boulder that's blocking the road for them to reach the summit of their mountain, and you resolve that old trauma, it means the subconscious mind now can stand down and say, you know what, it's not dangerous for you to stand up on a stage with a microphone in front of your face and to sing to a crowd of people. And that can help a person begin moving towards what it is that their heart desires. And when that happens, they're not going to struggle with the same problem of boredom. Does that make sense?
100%. I love that answer. RS says, wow, does he go into past lives with clients?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not your average hypnotherapist.
Yeah, I would say that over the 17 years of doing this work, that 75% of my clients, that the original cause of what they're dealing with is a past lifetime. And with respect to helping a person step into or find their passion, because a lot of people might say, that they're bored but they don't know what to do. They don't know what their passion is. Well, one of the ways that you find this is you introduce them to their spirit guide, and you have them in hypnosis ask their spirit guide, what is my purpose in this lifetime? What did I come here to learn? And how many lifetimes have I been working on this? And then you can take them into a past lifetime where they felt perfectly aligned with their heart, with their soul's purpose. And they can see in their mind's eye, they can feel in their body, more importantly, what it's like to be aligned with your soul's purpose. And that can help them in this extremely powerful way translate that into what that would mean for them now. What would I need to do to get that feeling right now? You can tell a person what it's like to be in love. They can read about it. They can watch other people on the screen enact the dynamic of being in love, but it's not the same as being in love themselves. And if you take them to a past lifetime where they were deeply in love and they feel that, now they know what that means. And they know when they feel it, or when they're moving toward it, because they've already felt it.
Amazing. I really love that. There's something so powerful in knowing that if I come to you with the problem, you are going to search high and low, this lifetime, past lifetimes, parallel lifetimes. Sure. You are going to get to the root for me.
We're going to get to the root together. Working together, we will get to the root. Because here's the thing, that we all have the inherent equipment. We all have the inherent ability to do this. I'm basically like a guide. If you went to a part of the world you'd never been before, if you went to the jungle or something, it would be smart to have a guide with you that can help you navigate this unfamiliar terrain. But you have the legs to ambulate you through that environment. You've got the lungs, you've got the eyes, you've got the ears to hear these exotic birds. You've got all the equipment that you need. What you might be lacking is a guide. And if you've got someone to help you lead you through this place, now you become familiar with this terrain, and at some point you don't need the guide anymore.
Amazing. Now, it's funny you bring up the word guide because we've talked about spirit guides multiple times in the conversation. And I frequently get asked, when people ask me to look at their chart, what are my spiritual gifts? Or people know I'm clairaudient and that I channel. How can I channel? How can I meet my spirit guides? This sounds like something that you are skilled at helping people be able to locate within themselves. Yes?
Yes. And I would say that one of the biggest impediments that people have to meeting their spirit guide, to going to a past lifetime, to going into the life between lives, to viewing the Akashic record, is actually disbelief. We have been programmed by the culture into which we have been born that life exists inside of a small box. There's a line from that Hamlet uses in the Shakespearean play Hamlet, where he says something to the effect of, "I will bind myself inside a walnut shell and call myself master of all I survey." Well, we have been bound inside of a walnut shell of belief about what our existence is, who we are, what God is, what the universe is, what kind of abilities and capabilities that we have. And if you don't believe that what is happening inside of your consciousness is on some level real, you might just push it away because you've been told from the time you were born that it's all in your head. It's just a dream. It's only your imagination. All of that has been diminished purposely on some level and not on purpose at another level. That our parents were just repeating what they were told. But how can something only dismissive be your imagination? I mean, we wouldn't have the technology that we are using right now, that our culture worships, unless someone could imagine it at some point. And yet, on the other hand, we say imagination is BS. It has no value. Well, that's not true. I say that imagination is the umbrella term under which falls inspiration, insight, epiphany, invention. All of these things come underneath this, and they are just as real as the words that come out of our mouth, as me lifting up this mug. The composer that hears a beautiful melody in his or her head, are we trying to say that's not real until they play it on a piano? Until they write it on sheet music? No, it's real the moment she hears it in her mind. It's the same for you and me and RS and everybody else that might be listening to this. And yet, if you push that away, you'll never get there. So part of what I do is help people understand this so they can embrace it. I help prepare them for the journey through the unfamiliar terrain before we take the journey. I help them with any fear that they might have, because that's another reason that a person could be blocked from these things, is that consciously or subconsciously, they believe that they're going to witness a lifetime where they were a complete. I had a person say this not long ago, and I made a video about it because I think it's funny. They were worried that they were an quote a-hole in a past lifetime, and they were terrified of witnessing this. So if a person has that and you don't help them move that fear out of the way first, they're not going to go there. So again, when the path is clear, we all have the capabilities, some more than others, to get to have these experiences.
Amazing. All right. So we have a technical question. I love that answer because it opens up that the root of this is belief, and that what we're working with here is the literal substance of what creates our world.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. We have a follow-up question here from Haley in our chat. She says she's been working on herself for a little while, but when she goes in to meditate or practice with imagination, she rarely sees visuals. um, I think she may identify, and I've seen people also identify as having aphantasia, some sort of inability to see visuals. And she wants to know, does the past life information that might come up in a session with you, does it only come to you? Does it come to the client? And I guess maybe a follow-up or second to that is, how does this work if a person doesn't see visuals?
Okay, those are really great questions, and I'm going to answer it. Maybe this is reverse order. It comes to the client. It doesn't. It sometimes I see things. Sometimes I hear them when I'm working with somebody, but that's not the essence of this work. It comes to them. I was saying before that we all have the equipment. We all have the spiritual equipment. We all have the capability to do this. You may specifically, well, there's two things. First of all, everyone interacts with the world on a physical level through, generally speaking, through a primary sense: visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Kinesthetic meaning touching things. It doesn't mean that a person who is primarily auditory doesn't also interact with the world kinesthetically and visually. We do. But our primary, in this example, would be auditory. Now, if I went into a past life, and let's say, Haley, that you're primarily kinesthetic, and yet you've been sort of taught by the culture that you're supposed to see things. Well, if you go into the past life regression expecting to see things and you don't, it can create this feeling of it's not working. And yet, for you, if you're kinesthetic in this example, you may be able to feel your feet standing on the proverbial ground of this past lifetime. So it's very important when you're working with somebody in past life regression that you honor their senses, not just visual. And once a person connects in, say, a kinesthetic way, like, a person can feel that they're standing, for example, or they can feel that they're lying down. Once you honor those feelings and you start helping them proceed in the regression via the kinesthetic mode, then the other two begin to open up. The other thing that could be going on is your subconscious mind could be protecting you by blocking your access to a past lifetime, because the subconscious knows exactly what happened there. And it doesn't want you to re-experience any kind of trauma, any kind of grief, any kind of pain, any kind of shame, any kind of guilt. And so it can shut this down. When this happens, you have to deal with the block first. You have to clear the block. And once that's done, then the road is open for the person to go into the past lifetime. So there's disbelief that can create a block. There's fear that can create a block. And then there's also expectation that can create a block. I'm expecting to see things, but I'm feeling somebody tap me on the shoulder and I'm going, go away, I'm waiting to see this thing. And these are all areas that I deal with clients to help them ensure that they're going to have a successful experience, that they're going to get past any blocks that they might have.
Amazing. Yeah, I wondered that if sometimes, because I definitely see it in a person's chart, that sometimes people's spiritual gifts they're not auditory or they're not visual. Sometimes the spiritual gift is going to be kind of a super sensory capacity. That is, of the physical nature or of the emotional nature. Sometimes it's not always that. And I try to remind people, like, just because we have some sort of personal or collective preference for being able to see or hear things, that doesn't negate that other gifts exist and are absolutely as valid.
100%. So, for example, from my own experience, I'm primarily auditory. I hear things much more readily than I see them or I feel them. And I've learned over a long period of time to trust that internal sense, the internal auditory sense, and to let that guide me through whatever it is that I'm doing, meeting with spirit guides or going into a past lifetime or going into life between lives. And when I do that, sometimes the visual comes, and it comes very, very powerfully. Sometimes the visual, or often the visual, is very dim, but I don't even worry about that. I just let it be what it wants to be, and I follow my primary sense, which is the internal auditory sense.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's asked such wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you.
There's a lot of love for you here in this chat.
Oh,
People are very grateful that you have shown up and that you're sharing what you're sharing. I'm getting, like Haley say, that all of that resonates. Thank you. Northern says, thank you so much to the guest speaker. The vent says, I was going to ask that. So thank you for making sure I got an answer.
sure.
So tons of really great stuff going on here. Our moderator, Kylie, has placed in the chat ways to connect with Peter. We've got his website and his YouTube channel. Subscribe to his YouTube channel today. Thank you, Kylie, for doing that. He's an extraordinary gift in whatever it is you're trying to create, whether it's your spiritual development, professional development, romantic development. You have something you want to work on. Peter's going to be a great guide for you in helping you get to the next step in your consciousness and in your physical world lived experiences. Peter, is there anything in particular you'd like to share with or leave our viewers with today before we go?
I guess I would circle back to what I said earlier in this chat about my belief what is at the essence of all of us, that we have this inner magnificence. And that we even know from modern neuroscience that the brain has something called plasticity, that the brain actually has the ability to rewire itself, that none of us is etched in stone, that none of us is stuck in a larger sense, that anytime hardship comes, it's really, in my opinion, it's an incentive. It's a clarion call to change something that's deeper. And that when we change that deeper part of us, which we have the capability to do, that this thing we've been struggling with will fade away. That's what I want to reinforce.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Definitely check out Peter's channel and Peter's website. There's some wonderful articles on his website for you guys, as well as all the information you need to work with him and book an appointment. I highly recommend it. And his subliminals, I mean, you guys heard my testimony. I was like listening to it, trying to like change relationships that weren't even in the room, and all those relationships changed. So I can't recommend his work highly enough. Thank you, Peter, for joining us today. It was great to have you.
Well, it was great to be here. And thank you, Kay. And thank you to all the people that tuned in and people that asked questions. Sincerely appreciate it.
Amazing. Take great care, everyone. And thanks for joining Creator Conference. You'll be able to rewatch this video and all the other videos from the Creator Conference in the Creator Conference playlist.